Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Jess's Writing Clubhouse. I am obviously the aforementioned Jess. I am author J.A.G. Quinto. I write LGBT romance in the adult category, and I now have a podcast that is now on its episode 2. Yay! I was kind of putting off doing this one just because it's like, oh, I have so much writing that I need to do. And I think us writers can definitely attest to it's like, we want to write all the words, but we don't want to do anything else other than write, or we just don't want to write. It's a cognitive dissonance. So today is going to be a more informative one. It's going to kind of piggyback off of what I worked on during episode 1, which is about like publishing history and my current works in progress. So I mentioned in episode 1 that I started publishing off of my Reaper series, which is a young adult series featuring the main character Piper, who is a high schooler who can see the Grim Reaper and has to save the world with her friends. But what I came to realize later on was that it wasn't the kind of story that I wanted to tell. Well, strike that. I do want to tell the story, but not in the way that I did. I don't think it should be a young adult book. It should actually be closer to an adult book, which makes more sense, especially considering the things that I have Piper go through emotionally and mentally. I'd like to explore that as she's an adult, but that's something that I'm going to end up having to work on when I get to that project, but that one is very much on the back burner. So I'm going to go through each of the books that I've published so far and kind of give you my thoughts on what I learned from each of those books. So we'll start off with the first Reaper's book, which was Stand Up, Fight Back. I wrote this, I published it in, I believe I was originally shooting for November of 2018, but it ended up getting published a month early, so it was officially put onto Amazon October 2018. And I had worked, this was the first book that I was legitimately like, I kind of want to publish this. And I don't even know what the timeline was when it came to actually publishing it. I just ended up working on it, and then when I felt like it was good enough, then I published it. Now, it took a while for it to actually get to the point where I felt like it was publishable, because I wrote, I think, like the first chapter, and I sent it to my co-author, Lux, and they did not like my main character, Piper. They thought that she was bland and just lifeless, and because I was still a very young writer, I got really defensive about it. I got so upset, and it nearly derailed any chance of Lux ever doing any more critique, because it's like, well, I don't want to ruin our friendship if I don't like your character. And I didn't realize it then, but that's exactly what I was doing. I was getting all up in my feelings because they didn't like my character. So then fast forward, I have the full first draft, and I sent it to my husband's then boss, who was also a teacher at one of the universities here, and he read it over. He only got to, I think, like chapter 7, and it gave him a very good idea of where things were kind of progressing to, and he basically agreed with what Lux said, that Piper was bland, needed to be fixed up more, and he did like some of the side characters, specifically like the Reapers and a couple of the friends. But for the most part, the main character was pretty much a blank slate. And upon like looking back on it now, years later, I can definitely agree with that. But at the time, I felt like I had been hit with a sledgehammer to the teeth. It was one of the hardest things emotionally that I had to deal with when it came to my writing, because you never want someone to just take the book baby that you've created and destroy it because it's not right. And I'm not saying it's not right that they shouldn't do that. It's just like in your heart you think, oh no, this book is fine. But in reality, we can all change things, we can all fix things and get better. And that's primarily what editing is for. And a lot of writers will get very upset when someone says something negative about their books, because it is a very creative endeavor, and it is so close to our hearts because we pour ourselves into our writing. And it's completely understandable why people get upset. But when you take it to the point of getting mad, then you're no longer able to think clearly on what you're writing. You're just going purely based off of those hurt feelings. And when you start actually looking at what they're saying, now I will preface this and say that there are some people that just say mean things just to be mean, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually like constructive criticism. Criticism that is given with the intention of helping you to make what you want to put out into the world better. And that's ultimately what, even taking like all the people that do want to just hurt you, like hear what they have to say. And then if your gut tells you that what they're saying is wrong, maybe just sit with it for a little bit. Just sit with it and just sit with any kind of criticism. And I had to take some time away to deal with my feelings because I had a lot of feelings when it came to that particular criticism. And when I came back to it, I realized that it wasn't done with malicious intent and he just wanted to help me. So I took his advice and I did a complete page 1 rewrite. And being the first book and being the first published work, it's not the greatest. I've looked back on it since and I'm like, ooh, no. I don't want to read this. But it taught me so much about the craft of writing. It helped me to be okay with accepting criticism and taking what is applicable and what is not applicable to fixing my overall story. And it's a process. It's something that you're going to have to work at throughout your career because there's always going to be people who will shit all over your work just because it's not for them. And in the age of the internet, everyone feels this sense of confidence that whatever they say, it's like, oh, well, it's just on the internet. No one's gonna like really care about it. It's like, well, people do care. And that's why when you are creative, it's like you have to take some of the criticism to heart and then some of it, you just let it slide off your back like a duck. Just water off a duck's back. So moving forward from book 1 into book 2, which was Stand Up, Break Out, this one was the one that I was pretty happy with for the most part. I do remember with drafting it, I was a little scared because I had always heard about the sophomore slump of people struggling with book 2. But the thing that I ended up dealing with more was trying to blend in the story that I was trying to tell, because I didn't outline a single thing about the entire series. I had plot points that I wanted to hit in each book, but not an overall scale of what I needed to do for each book in order to progress the series. And this one was also fun because it allowed me to branch out into the magic system that is a part of this. And it was a lot of fun to write. I will say that this one was the funnest one out of the 3 for the Reaper series that I wrote. And it's the one that has some really good moments that still make me tear up when I reread them, even though it's like kind of cringe to reread it. It's like the amount of writing mistakes in it. This one was also the first one where I actually tried to outline what was happening. I didn't do it very well because I still felt like I was pretty out of control with the pacing of it, but I did write down things that were going to happen in kind of a loose outline. So this was kind of my first foray into trying to outline and possibly not doing a great job of it, but live and learn. So this one didn't have as many like lessons to teach me. It was my stepping my foot into outlining and just being okay with getting everything down, figuring out my editing process and all that. Where we get into a lot of emotional growth is with book 3, Stand Up, Obtain Control. This one was by far the hardest one to write when it came to the actual drafting process, because this one was one of the big emotional books for various reasons, but the biggest one was that this was kind of where a big shift in the series was supposed to happen, and I think I did a good job, but I will say that this one was difficult in large part because at at the time, I decided I was going to try NaNoWriMo. And the story that I had planned out for it was a super emotionally draining one. And unfortunately, because I tried to work on both projects at the same time, it bled off into Stand Up Obtain Control. And it was so difficult to try to write both of those books together. And I finally got to about 25,000 words in the Nano novel, and I'm just like, I can't. I'm emotionally drained from this. I can't. I need to just take a step back and finish the work that I need to get done to publish. So I basically spent, I think, about a month just fast drafting the ending. And I knew it was going to be rough as hell. And this was only the first draft of this book, so I knew it was already going to need a lot of editing. Well, I didn't realize how strong of a shift that was, because when I read it back, there is a considerable gear shift about halfway through this story where I can tell that I shifted gears and started trying to fast draft it. And it was so jarring and it was so emotional because just reading it back physically hurt, because I could see my language changing throughout the entire book, that it's like, no, I don't think I can salvage anything other than the main plot from this. So I basically broke down the entire book into the basic scene list that I needed for the book to work. And I did basically a page one rewrite again, but even stricter than when I had done the original one. And it came out better. I do like what happened in it a lot better than the original one. A lot of characters changed because my mindset changed. And I also want to preface this, that this one was primarily written during all the lockdowns from COVID. And when I was redoing it, everyone was home and the emotional turmoil that was going on there was also not helping. But I did manage to get it out and I felt decent about it. I felt pretty happy for what I had been able to accomplish. I will say that since 2018, when I published Stand Up Fight Back, I didn't know where I was going with my career. And I wasn't selling any of the books. I think the first one is the only one that has like decent sales on it as of the recording of this. But I knew that I wasn't happy with where I was writing. And that's ultimately when I decided that it's like, you know what, I'm going to take a break from the Reaper series and I'm going to work on something that makes me happy. And that's ultimately when I decided to move on to my Hunter x Slayer series. And then I started working on my fourth published novel, which is The Hunter and the Cultist. And this one was the first one that I actually started using the Save the Cat beat sheet formula to plot out my book. And when I say it was like night and day, I am not kidding. It was refreshing. Even though we were still in lockdown, we were still dealing with this panorama, I felt so much better with what I was writing, what I was producing, and I was so stinking happy just to have this weight taken off my shoulders. And I've never felt more free than when I was first drafting that one, even though I had struggled with it because it's like, this is what I want to write, but I have this original story that's not making any sense, so I have to kind of shift things with the outline. But it came out so much better than I could have expected, and the kind of marketing work that I did with this one was way more than what I had done with the original ones, because I didn't know how to market. I had no clue how to do any kind of marketing or any kind of like promotion for myself. And this one, I wanted it to work so bad, and it did work. It's the only one that's still like selling out of the 4 that I've published, and it's the one that I am legitimately hoping will continue to make money for me, which is now why I'm working on books 2 and 3 of the Hunter x Slayer series. So I hope that those will follow in their predecessor's path when it comes to earnings. All throughout the publishing of these 4 books and then leading into working on the second and third book in the Hunter x X Slayer series, I've dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome. And if you've never heard that term, it's basically where you feel like, oh, I'm a fraud. What I'm doing, I'm just pretending to do this. I'm not actually an author. I'm just pretending. I'm not good enough to actually be able to pull this off. And a lot of that has to do with your feeling of self-worth. And it's tough. It's a really hard thing. And I honestly thought that I was just like alone in this, but apparently even authors like Neil Gaiman, who has so many books out that people just absolutely adore, and he's got TV shows and movies, and he still is a human being who has these insecurities. And it's when you start comparing yourself to others that imposter syndrome gets really loud. And I heard a quote a long time ago that it's like, the only person you should compare yourself to is yourself from yesterday. And I think that's really helpful. Also, comparison is the thief of joy is also a good one, but it's never going to completely go away. As much as I wish it would, I really wish it would go away, but ultimately in a creative endeavor, you're always going to have that little voice on your shoulder telling you that what you are doing is wrong and you can't do it. And the one thing that I've also learned is that voice is not always doing it with malicious intent. It's doing it in a vain attempt to protect you. And when you look at it as like it's trying to be that friend that tells you, hey, I know shit's going down, but maybe just give up and try something else. But if it's something that you really love and something that gives you life, then don't let that little voice stop you and just keep moving forward. As long as you make a little progress every day, even if you only manage 100 words, then you managed 100 words. Just be kind to yourself when the imposter syndrome starts to come up, because we're all feeling it. We all know how difficult it is to write a book. A lot of people say that it's like, oh, well, I've always wanted to write this book, but they never actually do it because it is such a labor-intensive process, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. And it's just something that is constantly needing to be, how do I put this, checked in on. Just make sure that you're okay. So now that we've gotten that heavy stuff out of the way, let's talk about the current works in progress that I have going on. As I said before, I'm working on books 2 and 3 of the Hunter x Slayer series, which is The Slayer and the Spy, which features Cain and Bastion, and The Gamer and the Hacker, which features Colette and May. All 4 of these characters have been featured in some way, shape, or form in books 1, and then for book 3, obviously, they are featured more prominently in book 2. And several reviewers were very excited about Bastion and Cain getting their own book because they were pretty interesting during book 1. And I hope to do that with further books, to like slightly feature each new couple somewhere within the previous one. This way you kind of have some expectation of what's going to happen later. Along with those is novellas that will fall in between each of the books to kind of give just a little bit of extra scenes with the previous couple, and then to get a jump off point for the next couple. And I wrote out the first one, which comes in between the Hunter and the Cultist and the Slayer and the Spy, but it doesn't fit with the Slayer and the Spy as it is now, so I need to rewrite it. So I'm thinking that the way that they will come out is that the novellas will come out after all 3 of the books have come out. This way I can get a good jumping off point for book 4, which way down the line. Then we have my space opera that I mentioned in the first episode. This one is one because I'm a big Star Trek fan. I've tried getting into Star Wars. I've only watched episode 4, and I'm like, okay, I can get why people like this. But I'm more of a Trekkie, honestly. And I truly enjoy enjoy like science fiction in certain aspects. I don't read a lot of science fiction, which is kind of sad because a lot of it just goes over my head. But I take in more science fiction-y stuff from video games and movies, and possibly TV shows if I can find a good one. I guess because it's more of a visual thing, I don't have to like jump through hoops with my brain, because my brain is very squishy soft sometimes. And science fiction terrifies me a little bit because of how big-brained it is. But this one is dealing with a academy that is very similar to Starfleet. It's called Orbital Command, and they basically train people to do everything in society, how to be captains, how to be pilots, how to be engineers, how to... basically anything that is like in a spacefaring society. And because it's primarily a romance, the science fiction is a little bit softer than you're probably going to see. And I had a lot of fun creating like all these different races, and I only have like basic information about them, but I do plan to elaborate more on them as I go along to make them fully fledged races, not just like Planet of the Hats where one trait equates to all of them. I want there to be nuance between the different races. Like you could have two different versions of one of the main races you meet first is the Coquette, and it's like you could have two different Coquette people and they are completely different from the archetypical Coquette that everyone knows, but they're still part of the same race, very much like humans are. So I've been having fun with that. I haven't worked on it very much, but I did start drafting out the first book. I need to re-outline it because I ended up losing that when I had my hard drive failure. So that'll be fun. The next one I have is my ode to like Marvel and DC. I just call it my superhero series because I grew up with X-Men. I grew up with superheroes being kind of something that is like, hey, this would be kind of fun to do. What would be fascinating is to have a world where they were accepted, and that's kind of where my jumping off point is. It also kind of solidified when I watched the anime One Punch Man, where heroes are very much a prominent thing in society. And I'm like, okay, well, what if the world is like, they have superheroes on the reg, they have all of these different factions that they can be a part of, and if they don't want to be a part of them, they can choose to. And I had started writing this as a like role play with my co-author Lux, and they actually helped me to conceptualize a lot of the characters, and I'm super excited for it because it does feel very much like a cross between Avengers and X-Men, in that it's a society where it's accepted, but there is still this underbelly of people that do not accept metahumans, which is my version of like the people who have abilities. And I'm enjoying the world building aspect of this one as well, very similar to the space opera one. The next one I have is actually for a serial that I plan to put out to my patrons. Originally it was like a choose your own adventure kind of thing because I grew up on those as well, but that's a whole lot of big brain that I can't seem to fathom. So what I'm doing instead is sort of in the vein of like video game romance paths, where you have this host of characters that you could potentially date, but you end up choosing one and kind of going through their story. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this one. I had this concept of like a fae or fairy kingdom that mortals will sometimes fall into at random, and they slowly get integrated into the society and become fairies themselves over the course of several months. And that's kind of how their population grows in a way, other than, of course, having their own offsprings. It's a way to bring in new blood. And they don't have any, like, control over this. It's just something that happens. They don't understand it. They just kind of view it as, like, magic. Again, very squishy soft. Don't entirely have all the details down, but basically, it's going to feature a male version and a female version. one, you have the two main characters. You have Gale. He's from New York, I think specifically like Brooklyn, I think I made him. And his mother passes away due to cancer. And while he's grieving, he comes across this beautiful book that has a little fairy on it. When he opens it up, it transports him into the world. Then you have Bethany. She comes from a well-off family that really did not give her the attention that she needed growing up. The person who gave her that attention is Siobhan, her nanny. And her nanny always told her stories about the Fae and wanted her to always remember that they were real. So when Siobhan died, she was obviously going through her stuff and found the very same notebook that has the little fairy on it and is also transported there. Now, originally I wrote it that they were able to like meet Gale and Bethany, but I don't know if I like that too much. I'm still thinking about writing it as like they're separate and that they happen at different times, but it's still very much a work in progress. And I do like it because I tried to factor in, it's like, okay, we have ones who are strictly gay, ones who are strictly lesbian, ones who are bisexual, we have non-binary representation, and each one of the potential love interests has a backstory that can be explored with whichever character or whichever main character is presenting it. And I'm still working on the format, but I really am enjoying what I have so far. Right now, mostly I have is the characters, their backstories, and some loose plots of at least the first one. So that's always fun. I mentioned at the top of this, when it came to my Reaper series, that I do plan to eventually rewrite it, but there's a whole lot of world building I gotta do. I gotta do a lot of outlining. I gotta do a full series outline so that the emotional beats are going to be there. And oh, it's gonna be a lot. But I'm hoping to get it done at some point because I do still want to tell the story that I had planned for the Reaper series. And the next one that I have is one that I've kind of been mulling over in my head of like wedding contemporary stories. Like I love weddings. Weddings are a lot of fun to write, a lot of fun to plot out. And I had this idea of like fairy tale retellings. And it's like fairy tale retelling, but make it gay. And that's ultimately what I'm planning on doing. And they'll all center around a wedding or something in the wedding industry. I also want to introduce a lot of like morally gray characters in this, like questionable ones. I already have thoughts of like the first one I want to do, but this is very rough. I have almost zero characters. I think I have like nil characters at this point, but this idea is just kind of like hitting me in the face, and I hope to eventually roll with it. And then the last one I have is one that I started kind of planning, but ultimately decided to kind of scrap it because I didn't like the direction it was kind of going in. And that is a heist series. I love heist movies. I love Ocean's 11, 12. I love Ocean's 8. Now You See Me. There are so many heist movies that I really love. And I also love the show Leverage. I'm like, I've thought about doing a heist series before and I abandoned it. So maybe I could try doing something similar to that again. So that one is the most thinnest one when it comes to like what I want to do with it, but I know I want to eventually do a heist series. So look out for that and information on that one. So this is basically all I have right now for the podcast. I will say that as of recording right now, I'm still working on books 2 and 3. I am trying in vain to get through them. The editing on book 2 is going a little slower than I hope, but I hope that it can kind of come back a little bit because, I scared myself a little bit when I started editing it because my word count went from like 86,000 to nearly 89,000 in 6 chapters. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I'm like, I know I'm an underwriter, but damn, this is like 4th draft area now. Why are we still adding so much? But I'm hoping that it doesn't grow too big. If I hit 100K, I'm probably going to say it's like, okay, anything after this might be a little low, but I don't know. And then for The Gamer and the Hacker, I'm still drafting it. I'm actually at like chapter 13, and I'm at that point where I'm questioning myself, where that imposter syndrome I spoke about earlier is coming to rear its head, and I'm not happy about it. So I'm kind of struggle busting it all the way through. So I hate the middle. The middle of the book sucks so much, because this is when like the imposter syndrome is real strong and it's getting to you real bad, and I'm just trying to get through it as best I can, because you can always edit. You cannot edit a blank page. But yeah, so I'm glad you all are here to listen to this, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming to listen to my podcast. You can reach me at my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I also am on Discord if you would like to come and chat. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I hope to hear from you later on. Bye-bye!